softwares in that space, you are seamlessly able to integrate and work with that, right? So that is what we are here to talk about.
Exactly.
Just about SAP, show of hands, has somebody not heard of SAP before? I would just ask it the other way. Okay, thank you. So SAP started off as an ERP company, basically being the backbone of organizations, but over time has also evolved into a company that provides CRM, sales automation to HR solutions to supply chain, logistics, and all of these solutions. But still, ERP happens to be at the core of what we do. And if you just look at the numbers, for example, 87% of the global commerce is generated today by SAP customers. 99 of the top Fortune 100 companies in the world are SAP customers. 1.8 mobile messages, billion mobile messages are run by SAP mobile services. 85 of the largest 100 companies by Fortune 100 are again SAP S4HANA customers. That means their core or their ERP is on SAP. And a little known fact is that among the customers that we count, 80% of them are SMEs, right? So of course we have the large names, we have the governments who are also SAP customers, but in terms of volume, 80% of it is still very much SMEs and digital natives. In India, we are the backbone for 45 of the top 50 companies. And we also not just work with the private sector, but very closely with the public sector and government policy makers as well. So if you look at right from the Indian Navy to the Central Board of Direct Taxes to most of the state governments, municipal boards, there is some bit of SAP that runs somewhere in the back end, right? And that kind of makes it very fundamental to the day-to-day operations of a lot of things that we touch, be it from a government standpoint, be it from a private sector standpoint as well. And that is where one of the reasons that we had this session was to kind of say, how do you have your USP as a company or as a startup, something that is able to seamlessly integrate with what the backend and the core is, right? So again, more numbers, but I think we already spoke about it, but one of the numbers that I want to focus on is the middle one of what we are calling as SAP BTP, right? So BTP basically stands for the Business Technology Platform. And for now, you know, I'm not talking whether it is SAP Business Technology Platform or anybody else. The Business Technology Platform is basically a platform as a service, a PaaS, that allows startups and the ecosystem to come build their own IP and monetize it, right? And the biggest advantage there is one, the access to the SAP install base for anybody who builds applications on this platform as a service, and two, ensuring that the integrations that are required for any company which runs the backend is coming out of the box and the applications are certified by SAP. So it becomes a very good starting point to sell into SAP install bases, right? If I put it as bluntly as that, right? And this business technology platform is very similar to some of the microservices that you might see from hyperscalers, for example, or force.com, right? And that's where I said I will keep this agnostic to what SAP does. But the unique thing about SAP's platform is the integrations and the foothold that it gives to SAP-centric organizations, which typically are, in the thousands, right? So it opens up a lot of scenarios that we can have. Now, what is the challenge in terms of data when it has to come out of an enterprise system, let's say SAP or an ERP, where you have your central company data of your financials, of some very secure IP, for example, Coca-Cola, or for example, Domino's. They even manage their recipes on SAP, right? If you don't manage your recipes on your core, you're not able to procure raw materials for it. But how do you ensure that it is secure and it is behind a firewall? All of that is managed using the layer of governance, security, and trust that manages your ERP, right? And for many years, ERP could just be in a silo where your transaction system used to be separate, and any innovation that you had to do, right? So for example, just taking the Domino's story ahead, if Domino's wanted to predict what kind of customers would like what kind of pizza, and to ensure that they are doing a route optimization on the fly for their drivers to ensure that pizzas are getting delivered on time, and they do something around just in time and optimization using machine learning. Now it is very easy to say, let us take all the data out, right, of the system, let us just dump it into a data lake or dump it into a SQL database, try and apply some ML, try and do something, right? But those kind of projects continue to remain as pilots, right? When you start looking at putting it in an enterprise context, the first question that gets asked is, how do we make it real time? How will it be pulling data in the data lake? It quickly becomes a data swarm. And if my applications are getting built on top of the data swarm, we all know what that will lead to. So this became a conversation of an 80-20, right? So where we say 20% of the data in terms of your data volume might be within this firewall, but in terms of context or value, this is usually 80%. Whereas all your big data coming from streaming devices, from social media, typically in volume might be 80%, but in terms of value, they typically become a 20, right? Because you need to really crunch to actually make something out of it. Whereas enterprise data is gold, right? You really have, when are my data paying? Is there somebody who is constantly missing, pre-sales cash orders, or is there a particular guy who is faulting on the quality of raw material, right? So these kind of conversations, is all happening here, right? So for example, if today one of the leading electric scooter manufacturers who is based in Hosur, if they have to look at where the electric batteries are wrong, right? Which procurement batch was it wrong? They just have to map that from the shop floor or from their testing directly to the MRP in SAP and look at the purchase order, and they know where was the fault, right? So that is where this world, the external world where testing happens, predictions happen, customer relationship happens, has to talk with this world, right? And this is the bridge that we talk about when we say the enterprise applications and the solutions that you build for enterprises need to be hand in glove with each other, right? So what does this essentially mean, right? If you look at any organization, you will typically have these three layers, in the organization, right? So you have the company itself, what we would call an intelligent, sustainable enterprise, a company, right? A profit center. And you typically have industry-specific end-to-end business processes. So in SAP world, we call it order to cash, procure to pay, hire to retire. So these are all life cycles, in a particular business decision, right? So if I'm selling and I am going to raise an invoice and I'm going to get money back, it is called order to cash, right? If I am going to buy something and I'm going to pay a vendor, it is called procure to pay. So these are some of the scenarios that typically the industry works with. And then we have very specific solutions like spend management, human capital, customer relationship, and these kind of things which power these industry-specific applications. So if I am, for example, Maruti, and I have my core manufacturing process for cars, how do I ensure that my salary management, my workforce planning management, or spending on raw materials and marketing and stuff like that, kind of also dovetails into this. That becomes the surround applications that are there. And the third pillar, which I'm talking about, which was not earlier focused on, is called the business technology platform, right? What we are talking about. So earlier, organizations' life cycle was kind of this. So they said, okay, this is where we have to report our P&L, we have to, talk about this to our investors, talk about this to our employees. So this used to be given a lot of attention. All these innovation parts, so to say, or all the playground for data and analytics used to be always outside, right? So that is something that we, believe that has to be seamlessly integrated with all the core applications that an organization would use. Now, if you look at how broadly we would classify it in terms of microservices that are provided on platforms like this. So one is application development. So you have your low-code, no-code platforms. To extend a core application, innovate. To give you a simple example, if I have truck drivers coming in to come and give raw materials day in and day out, the truck drivers need a mobile app, for example, and a gate pass to ensure that they know which bay to go and download the pellets that they have. In a large factory like Ola Electric, for example, that is a challenge because there are multiple bays. When a truck driver enters, they don't know where he has to go. In Tata Steel, for example, they have problems. The campus is so big in Jamshedpur that when a truck actually enters, they don't know how long the trucker is actually staying inside the campus. So they give them an RFID, they ensure that they are not overstaying, they are not eating free meals. Apparently, the meals inside the campus is much cheaper than outside, and drivers get free meals. So they actually end up camping days on end, finding a nice place for the truck, 5 days, 6 days within the campus, and they were running blind. So how do you kind of map your supply chain, your logistics with a custom application that you would extend on that specifically for drivers or specifically for fleet operators, where you're getting not just the information from the core in a governed way, but also any of the innovations that might have been applied here. For example, there was a startup which worked with Tata Steel on the business technology platform with IoT enabled and thermal heat sensing cameras to ensure that we are able to get a real-time information of where exactly every truck is, where exactly about doing sentiment analysis on social media, upselling to them, talking about behavioral analytics and all of that. But I have seen that people really struggle to use this gold mine, right? So you have things like your financials, your CRM, your customer relationship data. Even the largest brands today struggle to bridge the e-commerce data, which is very easily available because e-com websites give that easily, to things like offline data, managing the master data together with the e-com data, creating a master data set, doing that analytics is a big struggle, right? So that data and analytics, in itself becomes a very big topic. And again, if you think of a P&L statement, right, very simple, a profit and loss statement coming from finance, it actually in SAP hits about 120 different tables, right? So you have the incoming payments, outgoing payments, you have various T codes in SAP or any other financial system for that matter. How do you ensure that when you are taking data out to train an ML model, for example, or to build an innovation on top of this financial data, you ensure that the data doesn't get flattened out, right? So for example, a CSV is a flat data, it doesn't have hierarchy in it, right? It doesn't understand authorizations, it doesn't understand data blends that are there, it doesn't understand primary keys that have applied. So all of that application level logic that would be on a data completely gets flattened out if we don't have the data and analytics layer working seamlessly with the application layer, right? So that becomes important. And finally, an AI engine, right? I talked about it a lot. So be it ability to run open source Python or Julia or have Jupyter notebooks. How do I ensure that some specific IP that I have built in terms of an algorithm for a specific industry or for a specific company can be seamlessly infused here? Obviously, you need an AI engine. So that becomes the fourth pillar. So if you look at an app development, integration, data and analytics, and AI, are these four pillars that typically allow us to create extensions to enterprises to solve these problems. So right from Aditya Birla Group today to Vedanta and all of the large conglomerates, they are setting up their own ecosystems and they have subscriptions to platforms like these, right? Where they give this, because the integrations and the security is something that organizations then don't have to worry about. And then the startups are asked to develop and evolve on this kind of a platform, right? So that is where, yes, all the microservices that you need would be available, but at the same time, the organizations would already be, ensure that the data level authorizations, the governance related approvals, nothing has to be taken care of when these kind of things need to be done. And in terms of use cases, they are really diverse, right? So one of the leading jewelry and fashion brands in India, they have an issue, right? So they are an offline store. They also have an online store, but 90% of the business comes from offline. And they want to ensure that they are able to push the stock that is not getting pushed. They want to predict which would be the right frame for the right kind of person, right? Now the challenge is there is a stylist who is a very specific person who can look at my face and say, hey, for you this kind of frame will work. Now they have 3,000 plus frames in stock. And it is impossible that every retail store has a stock of each one of these 3,000 frames. So somewhere you need to predict what kind of frame needs to be sold to whom, and ensuring that the stylist, which is a very premium job description, is something that can be automated by a machine, right? So what they came up with is, iPad-based deep sensing cameras, and just like you see in Lenskart, but this is not Lenskart, where the deep sensing cameras could actually measure, my forehead length, my length between my brow and stuff like this, and also look at my inventory in SAP to say what is my slow moving inventory, and also look at historic billing data to say what are people in this age group and in this locality specifically historically bought. Based on that, it predicts 2 or 3 frames, looking at stock, looking at price, and also throws discounts there proactively, and the user can try it on with a virtual try on, of course. And then if the stock is available, they can get it then and there, or from there it can be shipped. But over time, it also helps the company to produce what people want to buy and reduce that inventory of 3,000 plus designs to maybe 150 plus, and also ensure that the stocking, whatever they are stocking up on their retail stores, is very, very relevant to where the store is, what kind of people are coming in there, and what they want to buy, right? So if you look at these kind of use cases from an application company, right, be it an SAP, be it an Oracle, these are typically problems startups solve, but it was never thought of that this could be solved on a platform by SAP, right? And that is something that the business technology platform provides. Based on all of these microservers, they fudge it somehow to ensure that they are able to claim warranty. So they had a lot of leakage there. So to plug the leakage due to service and to ensure that they are able to provide optimum customer level, they built this entire extension on the platform. And then if you look at the advantages here, we talk about 15% longer battery life and 25% customer retention, right? So this is more of, you can say, top line. But in terms of bottom line, there were actually millions of dollars saved because they were actually able to track any specific use cases have been solved. Right from predicting how much tax is going to come in to what are the likely people who are going to default, right? So anything like that, integrating to the core, clinical health, and again, I'm not spending too much time, but I just wanted to give you the plethora of use cases that are typically looked up on a platform like this and how it is solved, right? So right from Taronga Zoo, which is in Australia, and it is using that to plan their entire visits management and stuff like that, to longevity, right? So long story short, I think the core messaging that we had was to say there is a platform which integrates very, very easily with the backend application like SAP, and it ensures that you have anything and everything that you need to solve for a business problem. And we have examples of startups who have built something listed on the App Store. And if you remember my first slide, I talked about the ecosystem of SAP, the customer base that SAP has. And it straight away opens up a plethora of customers on a certified application where you can straight away sell from day one, right? And the program that we have to ensure that you are able to leverage this and we are able to, as SAP help, is called SAP Startup Studio, which in India is headed by my colleague Justin, who will also speak about this. But if you look at it, there are 5 key things that we provide as part of SAP Startup Studio. One, we have expert guidance. So that can be people who work on go-to-market, who work on the customer-facing side, like our direct sales teams, our center of excellence team, our pre-sales architects, software architects, who can exactly tell where is the gap and where is a market that a technology can solve for. Second is co-innovation. So we work very closely with startups to solve for specific business gaps. So for example, when GST came in, or for example, during COVID, what are some of the gaps that are there, and if the startups have the technology, how we can fill that gap and go to market together. Go-to-market support that I already spoke about. Fourth is the customer exposure. As I said, being in India, we have the advantage that we not only get the Indian market unit, but we also have the Asia Pacific and Japan, which we belong as a region, and we also have exposure to the global customer base that you can engage with, right? So for example, today we have customers who started off with the Indian automotive manufacturers and now have customers right in Japan and in Germany, right? Which are typically the 2 big hubs for global automotive. And finally, it is all coming under the SAP certification and deal execution. So everything has that SAP stamp to say that it is certified by SAP. So whenever you take your products to market, and you might have typically faced this challenge around where is the data center, what is the governance, we need to get clarity from our cloud architect and stuff like that. SAP typically is able to short circuit that process, right? Because the data never really leaves the SAP ecosystem. So global customers are really worried about GDPR, for example, and customer data leaving their data center. Those are some of the issues that this typically takes care of. And being a German company, GDPR is absolutely on top of our agenda, and we ensure that our ecosystem also follows that. So just to talk about some of the work that we have done so far and some of the success stories that we have had in India, as a company who works very closely with the ecosystem, I will probably invite Justin, who does this very passionately with multiple organizations. Justin.
Thanks, Varun. I think what Varun clearly articulated is the art of extensibility of the SAP Business Technology Platform, which remains to be the foundational pillar for our engagement. So our philosophy is very simple: co-innovation led go-to-market. So the intent is, how can we help you to build innovations leveraging the art of possibilities on SAP technologies, and how can we jointly take you to customers, right? So these numbers that you see here, yes, you may not have heard a lot about us out there because we are rather, very much focused inward and trying to solve some of these key customer statements, like what Varun was mentioning in terms of some of the complexities that we have helped some of the largest retailers in the country, solve with their business. But our focus has been primarily to see how can early stage entrepreneurs collaborate with us, ensure that there is a meaningful conversation and also co-innovation engagement, and then that resulting into an actual joint deal, right? Deal discovery as well as deal. So we are part of that entire 9 yards. We ensure that through the program, our intent is to ensure that we create a very strong handshake for you with SAP and then nurture that relationship. So if I have to call out some of our startups which we had, put the bet sometime in 2017-18 are the ones that we collaborate the most today, because it typically takes time in an enterprise world to create that trust with customers and all of that. But at the same time, what we have seen is, once we have a replicable use case, we ensure that there's enough and more of visibility that we have created within the local market unit as well as within the larger APJ market unit that we are kind of working with. So if you look at it, these sheer numbers kind of talk about it, right? Of course, one figure which I really want to call out is the influence revenue, right? As a program, we always believe that this should also be able to create, the program should also be able to generate value for SAP, because there is a substantial amount of investment which goes in terms of creating these partnerships, providing these landscapes, a lot of the investment coming in from multiple, customer officers and a lot of these functions. So it's important that we are able to create that value creation for SAP. And at the same time, if you look at this whole 2 million that I'm talking about, it's a similar figure that the startups who have collaborated with us who have generated, across 15 plus deals that we have carried out in the Indian market unit. And as we talk, we are now kind of also exploring some global partnerships with some of our other technology vendors and system integrators to see how startups are co-innovating or believing in us can be taken to global markets. So that's been the journey so far. So as Varun clearly articulated, business technology platform provides you the foundational architecture to collaborate with SAP. This is essentially the innovation layer that we kind of open up to the larger ecosystem, and we believe that as early stage as well as growth stage startups, there's a immense potential to collaborate with a technology vendor like SAP and ensure that we take these innovations jointly to customers and ensure that you are made for success, right? So that's the whole intent with the program. Would be more than happy to, if there are any specific queries around this whole program as well as around BTP, would be happy to see how we can support you on that journey. Also, a key call out is we are right now in the final stage of curation for our next cohort, which is starting off by end of August. If there are interests, we would love to, have conversation with you and see how we can collaborate.
One last thing I would like to call out before we open it up to questions is there might be some of you in the audience who are also looking at a backbone for your own organization as you grow, that we have very commonly seen. So right from Ola to Flipkart to Gupshup to 80 to 90% of the unicorns have gone to that journey where they need a backend ERP for themselves, right? And we run that from our sales side as a specific line of business called digital natives, right? And we have ERPs and core applications which form the backbone for the digital natives itself. So while we spoke extensively about early stage startups and how you can build with BTP and evolve, but if you're also an organization who are looking at the core application backbone for your company to manage your finances, to manage your core business, right? Of course, many people start with Tally, something like Katabook, but then these organizations themselves use something like SAP in the backend because of the scale at which business happens. So if you are in that phase of your journey, and if you want to talk about having SAP as the backbone more or less for your financials, for your day-to-day business operations, be it HR, CRM, whatever that is, we are more than happy to connect and have that conversation as well, to ensure that you have that backbone as you scale up, to ensure that the technology is able to scale at the speed that you are. Right. So with that, again, we wanted to keep it short because we wanted to have it more as a conversation, because I know this is not a typical conversation that would be in a forum like this. So we want to keep it open. I know there might be a few questions, so we are open for that right now. Thank you. Any questions for me or for Justin generally, or anything else? So Rainbow Hospitals uses SAP, the children care one. Tata Group as a group has a strategy of everything on SAP. So all of Tata's whatever new businesses are there, 1MG and also their hospitals, some of the ones that they run are all on SAP, and SAP has also industry specific solutions, right? So hospital management, airline and aviation, core banking and stuff like that, which have been given a digital native spin to it, right? While they all started off as applications from an on-premise, but from a digital native standpoint for these core we have. But yes, so Rainbow is one that immediately comes to mind. Globally, we have multiple, like I think Parkland Hospitals is one of the very popular ones, which did entire COVID stuff also with us. But if you're interested on something very specific, we can also connect later. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, but the only difference is there they don't use BTP to build something and sell, they use it for themselves. Right? So for example, if I have to give an example of Ola Electric, so in Ola Electric, in the plant in Hosur, how to merge the shop floor data which typically comes from a Bosch to the core data which comes from an ERP, and some data that comes completely arbitrary from somewhere else. How do we blend that data, get that shop floor intelligence, or even that 3D design CAD drawings, and blend that with the material IDs from SAP. So those kind of extensions is something that they build on BTP, a satellite to the core. So BTP essentially, a business technology platform, essentially solves for 3 different types of people. One is for large companies who build extensions for themselves using their own IT team or SAP partners to solve their specific business problems, and that is very common, like Tata Group, Asian Paints. They have their own IT teams which can do that, Infosys and all the TCS, Wipros.
Investments definitely area of focus. Until now, we have not had any sort of merger or acquisition kind of a discussion, but there are some discussions which have just been initiated. We are hopeful that from portfolio we'll have a couple of announcements coming in soon.
I think from the Paris cohort. So Skillet was a startup that was from the Startup Studio and now a certified startup globally that you can buy off the App Store and integrate with SuccessFactors. What does Skillet essentially do? It can do automated resume matching and also job standardization to ensure that when you are putting up a job, it is standardized and it doesn't sound like something not in a job family. And secondly, when resumes come in, it will ensure, they ensure that the keywords are picked up and it is matched with the right job, so that the recruiter doesn't have to go through a pile of stuff, and the key information is extracted and given to them, from where they can actually go into the CV. right? So that is something that Skillet did. But beyond that, and that was something that was made into a complete out-of-the-box solution and as a replicable solution. But we also have a customer in India who is into the BFSI space, into lending, and they actually have their people sitting in the dealerships. And obviously they have very high churn, and they have a lot of people. So they but of course when they hire, they want to ensure that the person can speak basic English, comes across as honest and stuff like that. So they actually developed an interviewing platform on BTP, where there was a video proctored interview. There were questions coming up, a person has to answer the person's sentiment. There can also be additional enhancement requests like the one that I told you, which is very unique. But still, although it might not be replicable, but it is also a matter of privilege for us to say there is something so innovative that is running on the platform powered by this startup to solve this very specific business problem. So we invest there as well with the startup to solve such problems. So yes.
But how accurate will the data not be outdated?
So again, so that is a conversation. But what Skillet essentially also does is they have a huge database of resumes that they train on, and something that on a monthly basis they do retraining on. So whenever, for example, after the post-COVID worlds, gaps in resumes and stuff like that. So ultimately it's an ML model, and it's as good as the data that you train on. But of course they also, or rather people always have tie-ups with these agencies which can provide a lot of resumes and stuff like that. So ultimately somewhere to procure that raw data to build the AI ML model of. But they do hold a patent for that, which is a patented technology for document fact extraction based on that. So I think they're one of the few organizations who have actually parsed millions of resumes so far, based on which the algorithm is built. So when you talk about accuracy, they're already right up there, right? And they have an IP around it. And that is something that we are also very cognizant of. We know that startups bring their own IP, and we want to ensure that that is completely protected, and something that they are able to leverage and scale upon. Anything to say?
No, I think you covered it quite well. I think one key factor that Skillet also brought on board was this whole thing called stack ranking. Right, so what it essentially does is that's where the AI, the proprietary AI from their side came into play, where essentially if you have a list of 3,000 or 4,000 resumes, what it does is bases your skill sets, competencies, and your educational background and your relevant experience, right? It kind of automatically creates a list basis that certain parameters aligned to what the specific requirement of the client is, right? So a recruiter necessarily doesn't have to go through all 3,000 resumes in their database to actually find the most optimal candidate. The top 50 or 100 might just show up, right? So that is something which has really worked well for them, and in fact, a couple of the deals that they have really cracked along with us with SAP, this has been a very key, innovation which has really worked well. And specifically, what they have, their engagement with SAP has been specifically around the recruitment central module of success factors. And I think this was like a wide space, specifically the
and SAP still keeps looking out for innovative startups in that space, and it can so be that both the startups are listed on the App Store, and then it is the customer's choice, right, ultimately to buy what they want. Just like on an Amazon, you have 100 things that do the same thing, but then based on ratings, based on the industry specific know-how that one might have for oil and gas, that the other might be more retail, we still give people a choice, right? So that's one point I wanted to make sure key. Even though we have something, it's not okay, shut. SAP is not looking at it, it's never like that. You're always on the lookout for innovative stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so right now what we are looking at is, because we are aligning more from the requirement of the market unit. So primarily 5 different industries that where we see the big bet, right? So high tech is definitely one of them. We see a lot of use cases coming in from utilities. A lot of the group conglomerates in India are working with us. CPG and retail, significant number of traction already. And we're also looking into automotive. These are the 4 major industries where we see the maximum traction. But but that's not the necessarily the barrier, right? we kind of look at scenarios across the industries, but these are the 4 industries where we see the maximum traction in this MU and the larger APG and globally as well, right? So if you look at it from even from an SAP strategy standpoint, we also have this larger narrative called Industry Cloud, where you're specifically building solutions catering to it's like verticalizing, you know, the entire application story, right? So there you see a lot of traction around automotive, CPG, retail, you know, and that's where we want to see how we can get our startups also aligned to that global strategy, such that, you know, you open up a larger GTM pool instead of just India as a market.
Any other questions? So I can answer that from the what BTP does in terms of equipment management, predictive quality, predictive maintenance, asset management side of things. But I also have Manish, who is actually the industry architect for India for some of our strategic customers, including most of the telco customers we have in India, the large ones. So maybe Manish can start and I can.
Sure, I can be. PSS or the CRM space, we have a lovely portfolio of solutions. Getting into network side, we don't have much actually. So what we are trying to do is build up some industry cloud solutions over there. So I think the rest of the community is much stronger in that play when it comes to network management, when it comes to even the network capacity planning, etc. So we have done some very interesting stuff with customers like Vodafone in India as well as globally, which are again, some of these are co-innovation projects that we have done. But if you look at pure the OSS or the NSS side of the world of telecoms, we don't have much of the play over there.
So not out of the box, but as Manish said, you know, this entire thing around capacity planning, optimization of assets, predictive quality, right? With one of the large entities, we even had this scenario that the communication lines are going via a desert. And if there is a bird that builds a nest there, it takes 2 days for the agent to actually go there, climb the pole and figure it out, right? So can we have a drone-based surveillance and then based on thermal sensing of the drone, see exactly where the droppage is so that it can be solved in a pointed way. So in all innovation-led, but as Manish pointed out, it works good with the core.
What we're also doing is building some partnerships in this area as well. So for example, we're doing some work with S3. S3 does a lot of the geo-mapping globally. And the telcos depend a lot on S3 for network planning, etc. So what we are doing is embedding some of our BTP solutions as well, along with S3, to accentuate this network planning. So one is how to optimize it further, because for telcos, the network architecture, the network planning becomes the most important capital expenditure. So that is where we are building some of these partnerships. By S3 के साथ we are doing some good work globally on this aspect.